Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. We are at the very beginning of what can potentially be a very auspicious year for many of us. Certainly, however fortunate that is to be, it's really based upon the energy that we have set in motion. And you might call it karma. So if you think back to about the 2007, 2008 timeframe, many of us were really being given at that time the opportunity to what we would consider to be a higher purpose, a higher calling, to recognize the reason why we came into this embodiment at this particular time. And 2015 is the year to put the pedal to the metal and push forward and to allow ourselves to recognize those goals, to allow ourselves to welcome whatever it is that we need so that we can achieve this purpose and continue in raising the consciousness of humanity. You know, certainly as we've been talking about in these last few months, we have seen some very, very unsettling events. In December, we witnessed the experience that took place in Ferguson, Missouri, and just in these last few days, we're seeing additional horrific events take place in Paris. You know, and certainly what we can do, even though these experiences could be happening so far away from us, is as I have always said, to send love to these places, to these locations. That's really how we can continue to offset some of this energy, but also to heal the energy of the devastation that has been taking place in these cities, and certainly in our daily meditations to visualize and envelop our earth in the healing light of love. That color is actually a very high, dusty pink color, you know, and every day in my own meditations, I certainly include the healing of our planet as well, because we very much need it at this time. You know, and when I talk about recognizing and understanding our higher calling, our higher purpose, certainly when we allow ourselves to be very clear with our connections with the spiritual realm, that's how we receive the information and the knowing and what it is that we need to do to continue to facilitate that process. I believe it was last month I briefly spoke of Saturn going into the sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius connects with our higher mind, the higher psychic powers, if you will, which I personally don't really feel or view psychic abilities to be powers of anything supernatural. Actually, I feel our psychic abilities are very natural and very much a part of our human experience and what it is that we need to experience here in this embodiment. As I was saying, Saturn in the sign of Sagittarius, it favors mental disciplines such as meditation, yoga. All of these disciplines strengthen our connections to the higher mind. It also clears our connections with the higher mind. So I'm certainly going to encourage every one of us to incorporate in some way, some sort of discipline, if you will, that will continue to allow us to have a very, very clear connection, a heightened connection to the higher mind, so that we can continue in receiving guidance, knowing, inspiration that will allow us to continue to put the pieces together of this puzzle in recognizing our higher calling, but also in knowing what we need to do to facilitate that process and set this energy in motion. We began January with a full moon. The full moon was on January 4th. And one of the things that is very significant about this full moon specifically is that it's triggering the energies which took place in October with the series of eclipse that took place in October. And also it's triggering the energies of the coming eclipse, which will take place in the March-April timeframe. In these months specifically, January, February, and going into March, it's a bit of a time to cleanse, to purge, to release, and to let go. You know, some of us will be called to do that in some very specific areas, perhaps our homes, perhaps with relationships. overall, I would suggest every one of us to reflect and review what no longer serves a purpose in our lives, especially with our beliefs that may be outmoded, our spiritual beliefs, perhaps our religious beliefs that no longer serve a purpose. Saturn going in the sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign of religion, of spirituality. Saturn cleanses. Saturn allows us to recognize what needs to be broken, what needs to crumble, so that we can continue on our path of our spiritual evolution. And it's very much so as Saturn goes through the sign of Sagittarius. During the course of this year, we may even observe some religious leaders who may not necessarily say who they are or necessarily present themselves who they say they are to be, fall from grace, if you will, because Saturn is also the planet of karma. If there's any energy that has been set in motion that might be negative energy, that may in some way not necessarily be something valid, something authentic, something that bears false witness, if you will. Saturn Saturn's the karma. Saturn will bring to fruition anything that may not necessarily be what it seems to be, so that we can recognize it and that we can move past the experience, move on, and move forward. You know, so certainly I would also allow us to recognize within ourselves that we create harmony and balance in our thoughts and also in our words, that we say what we mean and that we mean what we say, and to be very clear that there's congruency with our thoughts and our words, because also that congruency allows us to experience harmony and balance in our own lives, in our everyday lives. You know, the year 2015 in numerology, when we reduce those numbers down, the 2, the 0, the 1, and the 5, it comes to an 8. The number 8 connects with the knowing of as above, so below. And it kind of connects with what I was saying regarding balance, the as above, so below, the balance between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. That is something that we need to very much recognize in our everyday lives, so that we can continue experiencing harmony and balance in our lives. When we create the harmony and the balance from within and without, from the earth plane to the spiritual plane, that's when there's harmony, that's when there's peace, and that's when there is unity. So I would certainly encourage everyone to recognize in establishing those balances, especially as we go through this next year. We have on the on January 20th, we have a new moon, and that new moon, it's in the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is the sign most associated with certainly the age of Aquarius, the new age, the revolutionary age. Aquarius is the sign of revolution. It's also the sign of rebellion, and we certainly have seen a tremendous amount of rebellion taking place in the world, especially in these last few months. But Sagittarius, it's also the sign of awareness. It's also the sign of awakenings. The new moon, it's in the very, very early stages of Aquarius. So when something takes place in the early sign, in the early position of any sign, the energies of that sign are extremely, extremely present, and we become very aware of those energies. And with Aquarius, the energies of an awakening and awareness. I would certainly suggest every one of us to recognize what it is that we are awakening to in our own lives, because there's something that we need to know and there's something that we need to recognize. And for some of us, that recognition will allow us to contribute to the elevation of consciousness in humanity. So certainly allow yourself to be receptive to that information and acknowledge that information and welcome that information. Also, incidentally, on the new moon on January 20th, our dear friend Mercury begins its retrograde phase, and it's also in the sign of Aquarius. You know, whenever Mercury goes retrograde, it's not a time for alarm, it's not a time for a concern. Simply, it's a time to review, to reflect, to go within and allow ourselves to take inventory and evaluate and reevaluate what no longer might be serving a greater purpose. It's a great time to clean the closets and to clear out any energy, any excessive energy which may have accumulated. With Mercury, we pay attention to all the RE words: review, rewrite, restructure. All of that, all of those RE words are very much part of the Mercury retrograde, and in knowing that, we can apply those understandings to our lives and use that time for a greater purpose. Every cycle of every planet in every sign serves a greater purpose. And when we can understand the higher energies of that purpose, of those potentials, then we can really benefit from them and not necessarily run for cover and allow ourselves to be consumed by fear. And regarding fear, you know, in these last few months, we have seen such an elevation of fear, and that certainly can continue, especially in the coming months. I'm going to suggest for everyone to move past anything that might stir up or create a fear. If you're recognizing anything in your lives that's presenting fear, reflect on it and let it go. Release it, because once we let go of any fear, we begin to experience love. In the Course in Miracles, it says that we are either in love or in fear. Those are the only two emotions. I would certainly suggest to choose the experience of love. So with that, I will say thank you once again for welcoming me into your homes. I will be back to the mystical moon in April. I'm already looking to make my reservations for that trip. So I hope that everyone had a very safe, happy, and blessed holiday season. And let's welcome this new year in with greater hopes and understandings that, you know, we're really much a part of each other's lives. We are all very much one, regardless of where we are on the planet. So let's continue to usher in those understandings as we go through these next few months. Thank you. Blessed be. Namaste.